Welcome.
Welcome to the Everything Podcast, and in today's episode I'm going to be talking about another one of your review suggestions, and this time it is Roadhouse. But before I get to my review of Roadhouse, here is the trailer. That was the trailer for Roadhouse, but before I get to my review of Roadhouse, it is time for the cast list. So we have Jake Gyllenhaal as Jack Gyllenhaal. No, I was right, Jake Gyllenhaal. I think I was starting to doubt myself. Let's start again. Here is the cast list for Roadhouse. We have Jake Gyllenhaal as Dalton, Daniela Melchior as Ellie, Conor McGregor as Knox. We have Billy Magnussen as Ben Brandt. We have Jessica Williams as Frankie, BK Cannon as Laura, Joaquim de Almeida as Sheriff, Austin Post as Carter, Lucas Gage as Billy, Dominique Columbus as Reef, Artio Castro as Mo, J.D. Pardo as Del, Bew, Nap as Vince, Hannah Lena as Charlie, Kevin Carroll as Stephen, Robert Mineri as Jake, Darren Barnett as Sam, Travis Van Winkle as Dex, Caesar Paz as the Sheriff's Deputy, Franklin Romero as another Sheriff's Deputy, Catfish Gene as Clyde, Chad Guerrero as Outlaw Chad, Craig Nig as Dockmaster, Joe Chiotti as Liquor Store owner even, Vanessa Gomez Reyes as a shopper, Elenique Picardo as a Roadhouse waitress, Brain Valero as a delivery man, Jose Murto as Seclusion Stewart, Candy Santana as Shellcott. We have Jonathan Hunt as Carter Ford's cornerman. We have Cannon Smith as the knife man, Rory Rhodes as the rural warehouse bartender, Omar Payton as rural warehouse ref. We have Samuel Sang as lawyer. We have Catherine Reed as desk nurse, Ty Hemingway as oblivious tourist, Claudia Penna as woman in balcony, Alexander Bellone as husband, Alejandro Bescos as man in market. We have Luis Domingzo as a drunken man. We have Jay Heron as Jax Jetway Harris. We have Chris Tignoi as a UFC referee. We have Mark Smith also as a UFC referee. We have David Warren as Shorty. We have Kenny Lunzaretti as Mr. Bold. We have Bruce Buffer as himself, John Anik as himself, Daniel Cormer as himself, Megan Alovi as herself, Daniel Brayland as Brayland lead singer. We have Harley DeWinter as the Breland percussion and drums player. We have Stan Cunningham as the guitar player for Breland. We have Brent Taylor as the bass member of Breland. We have Natalie Bergman as the lead singer of Natalie Bergman and Friends. Eric Hall plays the drums for Natalie Bergman and Friends. Lisa Hunt does background vocals for Natalie Bergman and Friends. We have Elliot Bergman as sax and guitar for Natalie Bergman and Friends. We have Marco Moderno as guitar for Natalie Bergman and Friends. We have Chess Topics as the band for Natalie Bergman and Friends. We have Felix Valdez as trumpet for Natalie Bergman and Friends. We have David Rubin as the lead singer for Rockin' Dopsy Jr. and the Zido Twisters. Alton Robin Jr. Does the drums for Rockin' Dopsy Jr. and the Zido Twisters. Joseph Sona plays the guitarist for Rockin' Dopsy Jr. and the Zido Twisters. We have Michael Anthony Robin who does the accordion and synths for Rocky Dopso Jr. and the Zido Twisters. We have Patrick Lee Jackson who does bass for Rocky Dopsy Jr. and the Zido Twisters. We have Julius Handy who does saxophone for Rockin' Dopsy Jr. and the Zico Twisters. Angelica Joseph does vocals for Jelly Joseph Band. Albert Elnick does flute and saxophone for the Jelly Joseph Band. Francisco Alberto does drums for Jelly Joseph Band. Max Bronstein does guitar for Jelly Joseph Band. Noah Young does electric bass for Jelly Joseph Band. We have Brandon Butler who does the upright piano for Jelly Joseph Band. We have Tommy McLean who does who plays CD Eldkeck, Tony McLean and the Lafette Marcus vocals and upright piano. We have CC Eldcock as vocals and guitar. Curly Taylor does vocals, rubric and accordion for CD Eldcock, Tony McLean and the Lafayette Marquis. Chris Hunter does background vocals and drums for CD Alcott, Tommy McLean and the Lafayette Marquis. Joseph Burns does the background vocals and bass for CD Alcott, Tommy McLean and the Lafayette Marquis. We have Miranda Derrick as a Roadhouse dancer, James Derrick as a Roadhouse dancer, and that is all of the main cast. Yeah, because I may as well finish off because I thought there was quite a few, but it was only if I'll read these out. We have Gregory Connors as an uncredited looper. We have Rich Denmark as an uncredited character. We have Sandy Lehmans as Frank. We have Tommy Lensch as a bloody fighter. We have come on computer. We have Austin Lee Nichols as a spectator, along with Daniel Rocco. Daniel Rocco as another spectator, Pedro Salamanca as a bartender, and the final cast member of Roadhouse is Marcos Sanchez as a fish and wildlife officer. The writers for Roadhouse are Anthony Bugarotti, Chuck Mandry, and R. Lance Hill. The director of Roadhouse is Doug Liman, and the synopsis for Roadhouse is that an ex-UFC fighter, Dalton, takes a job as a bouncer at a Florida Keys Roadhouse, only to discover that this paradise is not all as it seems. Roadhouse was released on the 21st of March 2024. My opinion is I love this film, and it's a great review suggestion. And actually, funny story, when I was reviewing this episode on that day, which was yesterday from when I recorded this, the sequel, so Roadhouse 2, has been greenlit, will be filmed and released at some point. So if you liked Roadhouse, that's good news. If you didn't, it's not so good news. So with all of that, here is my review for Roadhouse. A fight is taking place. We then have the title sequence. The fight ends with a winner being declared. Dalton plans on fighting the winner. The winner declines fighting Dalton. Dalton wins the fight due to forfeit. Dalton is threatened by a man with a knife. Dalton's use of intimidation is complemented by Frankie. Dalton was stabbed by the man with a knife. Dalton rejects... where are we up to? Yeah, Dalton rejects Frankie's job offer. Frankie gives Dalton her phone number. A police officer asks Dalton to leave. Dalton eventually accepts Frankie's job offer. Dalton meets Charlie. Charlie gives Dalton a tourist leaflet. Stephen introduces himself to Dalton. Stephen gives Dalton directions. Dalton meets Laura and Billy. Laura makes a coffee for Dalton. A bar fight occurs. Dal breaks some glasses. Dal intimidates a man. Dal threatens Billy. Dalton stops. Where are we up to? Dalton stops Dal from hurting anyone. Dal breaks several snooker cues. Mo helps Dalton. Dalton repeatedly slaps Dal. Dalton fights with Dal and his henchmen. Dalton breaks Mo's arm. Dalton drives Dal and his henchmen to a hospital. Ellie gets annoyed at Dalton. Ellie administers medical treatment to Dalton. Reef and Billy play fight. Dalton asks Frankie about the name of the house. Frankie warns Dalton about a crocodile. Dalton remembers his days as a UFC fighter until Laura wakes him up. Laura has bought Dalton breakfast. Laura tells Dalton about the previous bouncers. Dalton reunites with Charlie. Dalton stops a theft. I just created a word there. Dalton stops a theft from taking place. Charlie tells Dalton about her father, who has multiple jobs, and her mother passed away last year. Dal's henchmen talk to Ben on board a boat. Ben yells at Dal's henchmen. Mo tells Ben about Dalton. Ben hits the bow's captain. A band performs. Some of the band's spectators argue. Dalton warns Billy about a man with a knife. The spectators that previously argued fight with each other. Dalton gives Billy some fighting advice. Billy gets involved in the fight. Dalton helps Billy. Dalton gives Billy some more fighting advice. Billy breaks up a fight. Dalton works on top of the boat he is sleeping in. Dalton talks to Reef. Billy and Reef break up several fights. Billy gives Reef some advice. Dalton escorts a drunk man to his car. Dalton remembers one of his UFC weigh-ins as well as one of his fights. Dalton reunites with Ellie. Dalton shares some facts with Ellie. Dalton compliments Ellie. Frankie tells Dalton about his uncle. Dalton gets hit by a car. Dalton gets hit by another car. Dalton falls from this car into the sea. Dalton re-encounters Dal. Dal points a gun at Dalton. Dalton fights Dal. Dalton attempts to save Dal from being eaten by a crocodile. The dock master tells Dalton about his dead dog. Dalton and Charlie try to figure out Dal's henchman's plan. Dalton meets Jack. Jack is a henchman of Ben. Dalton threatens Jack. Dalton breaks several of Jack's fingers. Dalton gives some advice to Sam about Jack's broken fingers. Frankie informs Dalton that Dal has died. Jack tells Ben about his encounter with Dalton. Ben throws his phone into the sea. Knox walks around the city naked. Knox headbutts a man. Ellie invites Dalton for a boat trip. Dalton and Ellie talk about Dal's death and Ben. Dalton talks about his home state. Dalton and Ellie kiss. Clyde threatens Knox. Knox ignores Clyde's threat. Ben yells at Mo. Knox punches Ben. Knox was enlisted by Ben's father. Ben explains who Dalton is to Knox. The police question Dalton. A man questions Dalton's toughness. This man asks Dalton to leave the city. Dalton is attacked by several police officers at the office of the sheriff. Ellie saves Dalton from being killed. Ellie slaps the sheriff. Ellie reveals that the sheriff is her father. Dalton tells Laura about his encounter with the sheriff. Ben introduces himself to Dalton. Ben questions Dalton. Ben shows Dalton one of his UFC fights. Ben gives Knox the go-ahead to injure Dalton. Frankie yells at Ben. Knox destroys some tables. Knox attacks Billy and Reef. Knox fights with several people. Knox calls out Dalton. Dalton answers Knox. Dalton and Knox fight. Dalton tells Frankie that he is leaving. Dalton is informed that both Charlie and Stephen are currently in hospital. Dalton meets Vince. Dalton and Vince fight. Dalton kills Vince. Mo tells Dalton about his intentions. Mo passes on some information to Dalton. Dalton remembers several of his UFC fights. Dalton attacks a police officer. Dalton finds a crate full of money. Dalton uses a police officer's gun to shoot someone. Dalton knocks out a police officer. The sheriff informs Dalton that Ben has kidnapped Ellie. Dalton borrows Dex's boat. Knox crashes a car into a tree. Sam punches Dalton even getting a bit tongue-tied there. The sheriff lied to Dalton about Ellie being kidnapped. Ben kidnapped Ellie without the sheriff's knowledge. Dalton blows up Dex's boat. Dalton attempts to save Ellie whilst fighting several people. Ben re-kidnaps Ellie. Ellie fights Ben. Ben's boat with Ben on board crashes. Dalton fights with Ben and Knox. Again, Knox stabs Dalton. Ben orders Knox to kill Dalton. Knox kills Ben. Dalton continuously stabs Knox. Dalton kills Knox. Dalton apologises to Ellie. Dalton leaves. Stephen finds the crate of money that Dalton stole from Ben. Dalton says goodbye to Charlie, and Knox is actually alive and escapes hospital. That is my review of Roadhouse. So let me know in the comments below what you thought about Roadhouse. If you watched it, my review. If you didn't, you can do those in the comments below, as well as any TV show or movie suggestions or anything else. It doesn't have to be TV or movie related that you would like to cover on the channel, me to cover on the channel. Like I said, you can do all of those in the comments section below. But without further ado, remember you can also like, comment and subscribe. And that's it for today's episode of the Everything Podcast. Goodbye.